Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Matt's son suddenly appeared in Victor Newman's office, her eyes wide with despair, her voice pulsing yet filled with a fierce determination that no bone
could ignore.
The last time anyone had seen her, she was just a child, caught in the murk of her father's dangerous snares and the Machiavellian commercial wars that define the Newman conglomerate. Now, times latterly, she had grown into a youthful woman, but the fear and urgency in her expression made it clear that the stakes had no way been advanced. Victor, seated behind his assessing office, goggled at her, his usual calm and commanding address shortly faltering as he took in her presence. She clasped her hands together, nearly contending, as she rumored, Please do hurt him. He's my father, he's all I've left." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the office lights, the pressure so thick it felt nearly palpable. Outside the office, the megacity sounded to break, as if the entire city of Genoa City inclusively held its breath. Everyone knew what Victor Newman was able of: ruthless, calculating, and hugely grim when it came to exacting vengeance or guarding his conglomerate, but commodity in the youthful woman's eyes, commodity raw and genuine, cut through the layers of his fabulous stoicism. Her words weren't just a plea. They were a challenge, a test of Victor's humanity. Could he, the man who had erected an conglomerate on power, wealth, and intimidation, find room for mercy in his heart? Matt, ignorant that his son had tracked him down to the Newman estate, had been possessed by one of Victor's most trusted apprentices, and the situation had been twisting toward disaster. The pressure escalated with every passing second, each crack of the timepiece a memorial that Matt's life hung in the balance, that one wrong move could lead to catastrophe. The son's unforeseen entrance was dramatic, nearly cinematic, and it sounded to draw every ounce of attention in the room directly to her. Victor's piercing aspect met hers, and for the first time in times, he appeared uncertain, nearly vulnerable. The youthful woman's voice grew stronger, filled with a blend of wrathfulness, anguish, and fierce fidelity. She reminded Victor of the mortal cost behind his business plots, of the real people whose lives were entangled in the games of power he played so painlessly. Her words were refocused yet sincere. "You've erected an conglomerate, yes, but at what cost? How numerous families have been destroyed by your ambition. My father, my family, we aren't pawns in your game." The raw emotion in her voice was insolvable to ignore, cutting through the air like a sharp blade, leaving Victor shortly speechless. He leaned back in as president, his fritters steepled together, considering the weight of her words. In that moment, Genoa City felt lower, more intimate, as if the entire world had narrowed down to this one battle. Flashbacks to Matt's once battles, his unvarying determination, and his quiet but loyal moral compass surged through Victor's mind. He flashed back the numerous times Matt had stood in his way, the subtle but patient challenges that had tested Victor's tolerance and cunning. Yet then was the son, a living, breathing memorial of Matt's humanity, standing before him not with pitfalls or schemes, but with stopgap, fear, and a plea for mercy. The pressure was nearly unsupportable. The youthful woman's presence sounded to enkindle a conflict within Victor, a battle between his ruthless instincts and the flicker of empathy that he infrequently allowed himself to admit. Every word she spoke sounded to echo through the corridors of his mind, challenging his opinions and forcing him to defy the consequences of his conduct. Outside the walls of the Newman estate, whispers began to spread across Genoa City like campfire. News of Matt's son appearing at Victor's doorstep traveled snappily through the conduit of the megacity's social and business nobility. Musketeers, adversaries, and rivals likewise suspected about the outgrowth, each imagining the possible scripts. Would Victor show mercy, or would he demonstrate his fabulous ruthlessness, making an illustration out of Matt formerly and for all? The pressure was palpable, and everyone knew that whatever happened next could alter the balance of power in Genoa City ever. The youthful woman, seeing the weight of the moment, took a deep breath and stepped near, her aspect unwavering despite the fear that gripped her heart. She spoke again, her voice stronger, more bent. "I'm soliciting you spare him. Do and let your conglomerate be erected on my father's suffering. Please, Victor, I know you can be better than this. Victor sat in silence, absorbing every word, every nuance of emotion that radiated from her. His mind contended, considering the counter-accusations, not just for Matt, not just for himself, but for the entire Newman heritage. The power dynamics that had defined his life suddenly sounded secondary to the raw, mortal plea before him. It was a vital moment, one that could review his relationship with his family, with Matt, and maybe indeed with the moral compass he'd long abandoned. Outdoors, the megacity's skyline sounded to image the drama unfolding within those walls, the sun casting long murk across the thoroughfares, the distant hum of business a constant memorial that life went on, unconscious to the particular storm raging inside the Newman estate. As the twinkles stretched on, the youthful woman's determination no way wavered. She stood her ground, refusing to let fear mandate her conduct. Her courage was palpable, nearly contagious, and indeed Victor couldn't help but feel its influence. For the first time, he was faced not with a contender, not with a schemer, but with someone who embodied integrity, love, and unyielding fidelity. It was a stark discrepancy to the frequently cold and advised world he'd erected around himself, a memorial that power, without humanity, was eventually concave. Also, in a moment that sounded to last both in eternity and in moment, Victor eventually spoke. His voice, calm yet fostering, carried the weight of times of experience, authority, and strategic thinking, but beneath it dallied a hint of commodity unanticipated, a consideration of mercy. The youthful woman's eyes widened, hope fluttering across her face as she realized that maybe, just maybe, her father might be spared. The air was thick with expectation, the kind that grips every whim-whams and holds every twinkle in suspension. Genoa City itself sounded to break, as if holding its breath along with her. In that single, tense hassle, the fates of Matt, his son, and Victor Newman intertwined in a web of emotion, power, and moral reckoning. The counter-accusations where immense alliances could shift, connections could fracture or strengthen, and the delicate balance of Genoa City's social and commercial scale could be altered ever. The youthful woman's frippery in the face of inviting odds, her unvarying plea for her father's safety, and her amenability to defy one of the most important men in the megacity had created a moment that would be flashed back for times to come, a dramatic, heart-wrenching memorial that indeed in a world dominated by wealth, power, and ambition, the mortal spirit couldn't be ignored, and occasionally, a single valorous act could ripple across the lives of numerous, forcing indeed the most redoubtable numbers to reckon with the consequences of their choices. Victor's aspect dallied on Matt's son, every line of his face sculpted by decades of power, treason, and strategic computation, yet now softened, if only slightly, by the raw humanity in front of him. He could see in her the same fire, the same intransigence that had always defined Matt. Her eyes imaged his father's strength, his turn down to back down, his imperturbable sense of morality in a world that sounded to award ruthlessness above all additional. Victor leaned back, the leather of his president creaking under the weight of the pressure, and allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He allowed. Of all the battles he'd waged, the people he'd crushed, the musketeers and foes likewise who had fallen victim to his conglomerate structure, and yet then was a youthful woman, a single voice, a single plea, able of cutting through times of ambition, revenge, and colluding. Her words had rattled him in a way no commercial initiative, no advised trouble, ever could. For a brief, transitory second, he wondered if he'd forgotten what it was like to be on the entering end of fear, to stand helpless before someone who held the power to decide your fate. The youthful woman, seeing the vacillation flicker across Victor's face, pressed on, her voice pulsing but growing with each word. I know who you are, Victor. I know what you've done, and I know what you're able of. But this is different. My father isn't your adversary. He's no way hurt you. He's no way sought to take what's yours. He's only ever tried to cover the people he loves, and I'm one of those people. She stepped closer, her hands shaking but refusing to let go of the unnoticeable thread of courage that held her upright. I doan't watch about your conglomerate. I doan't watch about plutocrat or power. I watch about him. About my family. About what's right. And I'm soliciting you, please do not destroy him. Please, Victor. The despair was palpable, yet there was also a steeliness beneath it, a defiance that couldn't be ignored. Victor's mind contended. He allowed. Of the ripple effect that sparing Matt could have, how it might be perceived by abettors and adversaries likewise, how it could buoy others to challenge him, question his authority, or exploit perceived sins. Every instinct in him screamed to assert dominance, to crush any hint of defiance, to remind the world why Victor Newman was untouchable. And yet there was commodity in her unvarying aspect. Commodity that imaged the kind of fidelity, love, and courage that he'd formerly honored in people he admired. He flashed back moments from his history, transitory images of those rare individualities who had forced him to question himself, who had made him see beyond the endless computations of profit and power. And now, this youthful woman, Matt's son, was standing in the center of that storm, daring him to consider mercy, daring him to admit the mortal cost behind his grim pursuit of supremacy. Meanwhile, Matt's son's heart pounded in her casket like a war barrel. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, each alternate stretching into an eternity. She knew that one wrong word, one misstep, could spark the exact outgrowth she stressed the destruction of the only person she had left in the world. Her studies flitted to recollections of her father, recollections she had tried to bury, recollections that reminded her of why she had come then in the first place. She flashed back Matt's quiet moments of guidance, his assignments about integrity, courage, and standing up for what's right indeed when the odds were piled against you. She flashed back the offerings he'd made, the times he'd walked into peril without vacillation, all to cover the people he loved. And now it was her turn to step into that fire, to defy one of the most important men in Genoa City with nothing but verity, fidelity, and love as her guard. Victor shifted slightly in his president, his fritters tapping a silent meter on the polished wood of his office. He considered the larger picture, the commercial geography, the implicit fallout, the delicate balance of alliances that had defined the megacity for decades. He allowed. Of Jack, of Ashley, of Phyllis, of the endless web of power struggles and backstabbings that had made Genoa City a chessboard of manipulation and strategy. And yet, in that moment, all of that sounded secondary to the singular, piercing verity before him, the son of Matt, vulnerable yet unyielding, standing as the living personification of everything that was at stake in mortal terms. The irony was lost on Victor, that in a megacity dominated by power, ambition, and cunning, it could be the heart, not the mind, that mandated the outgrowth of such a critical battle. The youthful woman's voice broke the silence again, sharper this time, carrying both fear and righteous wrathfulness. Do you really want to be the man who destroys a family just to prove a point? Do you want to be flashed back as someone who valued power over people, plutocrat over love, control over compassion? She broke, her eyes glistering with unshed gashes, yet her station remained bent. I'm not asking you to be my friend. I'm not asking you to forgive him or to forget the history. I'm asking you to choose, right then, right now, to spare him. For one moment, choose humanity. Choose mercy. Victor's casket tensed. The words hit him harder than any legal initiative, any commercial preemption, any scheme he'd orchestrated in his fabled career. He could feel the pressure curling around his heart, a rare, strange sensation, mistrustfulness, empathy, indeed sweat, mingling in a way that made him acutely apprehensive of his own mortality, of the fragility of power when brazened with raw mortal emotion. He wanted to maintain control, to assert dominance, to remind the megacity why Victor Newman was a force that couldn't be defied. And yet, in the depths of that battle, he set up himself unfit to act with ruthless certainty. Outside the office, Genoa City sounded nearly to hold its breath. The whispers had grown into murmurs, The scuttlebutt of Matt's son defying Victor Newman spreading like campfire through social circles, coffee shops, commercial services, and the buzzing halls of society events. Everyone suspected, everyone imagined, everyone stressed the implicit outgrowth. Would Victor demonstrate his fabulous ruthlessness, making an illustration of Matt? Or would he show restraint, revealing a side of himself that indeed his closest confidants had infrequently, if ever, witnessed? Matt's son felt her own courage swell, knowing the eyes of the megacity, the murk of history, and the heritage of power and fear were all importing down on this singular moment. She could see Victor's mind working, calculating, importing, scrupling, and she knew that her words had formerly made an impact. For the first time, she tasted vulnerability, a crack in the armor of a man who had infrequently been questioned, let alone challenged in such a profoundly particular way. The stakes couldn't have been advanced. The pressure in the room was nearly unsupportable, the air thick with expectation. Also, in an unanticipated move that left her heart pounding, Victor eventually spoke. His voice was calm, authoritative, yet there was a subtle wimpiness, a nearly inappreciable earthquake that betrayed the internal conflict raging within him. "You're bold, I'll give you that. You remind me of someone I formerly knew, someone who believed in the idea that indeed in the darkest of times, people could choose what's right over what's easy. You've come then with courage, with fidelity, with commodity that plutocrat and power could no way buy. And I admit it gives me pause." He broke, studying her face, reading every microexpression, every flicker of stopgap and fear, every suggestion that her plea was genuine. "Your father, he has been a nuisance in my side, yes. But he's also a man of principles. Maybe I've undervalued him, and maybe I've undervalued you." The youthful woman felt a swell of stopgap, yet she knew better than to relax fully. Victor Newman was changeable, able of unforeseen reversals, and the stakes were as high as they could conceivably be. Her hands, still clasped tightly, quivered slightly as she took a step closer. "Also make the right choice," she rumored, her voice carrying the weight of every memory, every immolation, every ounce of love she had for her father. "Extra him. Don't let history flash back you as someone who destroyed what signified most, someone who let ambition overshadow humanity." Victor's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and in that transitory regard, the room sounded to shift. The pressure, formerly nearly suffocating, gave way to a fragile sense of possibility, a crack in the rigid walls of power that had defined the Newman conglomerate for decades. He could see, with perfect clarity, the stakes of his decision, the implicit fallout, the shifting alliances, the ripple effect across Genoa City's commercial and social geography. And yet, despite the threat, despite the implicit consequences, he felt commodity that he hadn't felt in times, a hint of respect, indeed admiration, for the courage, integrity, and love embodied in this single, recalcitrant youthful woman. Victor remained silent for a long moment, the weight of the room pressing down on him like the graveness of the megacity itself, his mind contending through every possibility, every consequence, every subtle nuance that could cock the balance one way or another. He could feel the youthful woman's eyes on him, unwavering, unyielding, the quiet intensity of her aspect. Cutting through the walls of power and pride he'd spent decades erecting around himself. Nearly deep down, he honored the verity she carried, the same verity that Matt had always lived by, the idea that family, fidelity, and integrity signified far further than plutocrat, far further than ambition, far further than conglomerate. And for the first time in times, Victor Newman allowed himself to feel that stitch of mistrustfulness, that bitsy flicker of humanity that so numerous had assumed long dead, buried under the weight of his vanquishing and battles. The youthful woman could smell it too. She leaned slightly forward, her hands unfurling for the first time as though daring the air itself to bear substantiation to the sincerity of her plea, her voice pulsing but determined as she said, "Victor, I'm not then to fight you. I'm not then to manipulate you. I'm then to remind you that my father, Matt, is further than a name, further than a contender, further than a pawn in your games. He's a man of honor, a man who loves his family, and I'm soliciting you to fate that before it's too late." The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence, charged with the intensity of a storm yet to break, and Victor felt them settle into the deepest corridor of his mind, forcing him to defy the reality that, for formerly, he could calculate solely on power, intimidation, or strategy to mandate the outgrowth. There was a choice before him, raw and mortal, and the enormity of that choice pressed down on him more strongly than any business deal or commercial preemption ever could. Outdoors, the megacity's lights flitted as evening approached, casting long murk across the skyline, and for a transitory moment, it was as if all of Genoa City had braked, suspended in time to witness this singular battle, this dramatic collision of power and vulnerability, of courage and fear, of a father's life hanging in the balance and a son's hopeless plea shaping the fate of them both.